What's happening, good people? Welcome to Macro Dirt Podcast number 10. I'm over here with JD's Nuts right now. What's going on, brother?
What's up, Stinky Nuts?
How are you today?
Good.
Yeah, we got a lot going on today, man. Let's get right into it. Market response to Jackson Hole sounds like we are getting the rate cuts we were promised. Market kind of digs it, didn't back off at all. We know what the main event is, though, right? Today, JD?
Nvidia earnings.
After the bell.
Yep.
How's the setup? Give me your scoop.
Looking at the charts, I looked at the Nvidia chart. You got on DeMark, you got a 13 sell before the crisis. You got a 9 sell right now. The S&P's at a 13 sell. The Nasdaq. I mean, the charts are lining up for this to be a horror show. My guess is, if I were to guess, they probably run it up after the release, and then we walk in tomorrow and everything's down 2%, and Nvidia is down like 7 or 8%. That's my guess as to what's going to happen.
I
So,
think, yeah, I'm very much along the same lines today. The bull market ends when good news is interpreted negatively.
I
So
mean,
I
it's
think,
it's not so much that I think that Nvidia is a bad company, or I'm a hater of Nvidia, or I think they're going to miss earnings. I think they're absolutely going to beat earnings, but expectations are so ridiculous that there's no possible way that they can meet them. And this, we were going to get here eventually. Like, we were absolutely going to get here over time. One of the things I tweeted out over the last 24 hours was, there's a watch party for Nvidia earnings in Brooklyn, and there's a picture of Jensen Huang with laser eyes.
yeah,
So
that's
stuff
the
like
stuff.
that.
Yeah.
There was an article in the New York Post talking about how Google and Facebook workers are jealous of Nvidia workers because they're all worth like 25 million bucks on their stock. You know, there's
Yeah.
a bunch of sentiment stuff like bubbling up here.
Yeah, the sentiment stuff is really powerful when you've been sitting in front of the screens for a long time. And we're absolutely not hating on NVIDIA. We're just making sure that we navigate the setup, right? Like that's the most important thing. I tend to agree with you where I got a feeling that after the report, they're going to just goose it because that's what NVIDIA generally does after the report.
Yep.
And then cooler heads will prevail. I would love to see it teed up like a beach ball tomorrow morning. Like, we'll close at the bottom of the range today. I'd love to see it teed up like a beach ball back to the top of the range on an earnings beat and then see the thing come apart like wet socks on a chicken from there. I think that would be entertaining and something that we could really trade and make money off of.
Come
I
apart like a soup sandwich.
Yeah, totally, man. I mean, we just watched Nvidia on the way up suck all the oxygen out of the stock market, right? And everybody we were watching them sell other sectors of tech just to get longer Nvidia.
Yep.
And when you get to that phase, that this is what the market is waiting on, right? And it's amazing, as you pointed out, when that lines up with these DMARC 13s in the stock, a DMARC 13 in the S&P. None of us with experience will be shocked if this thing literally, like we just said, comes apart after the Nvidia earnings, kind of no matter what they are.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so we're going to get to that for sure. Going in the opposite direction right now, I want to touch on this one stock for a moment. I want to see what your view is on it. I've been bullish Costco. I finally got myself off the zero boundary on the last dip into the moving averages. I continue to go there and spend 400 to 600 bucks a pop on groceries, gas, and alcohol. And the stock is trading up towards $1,000 right now. And even though I'm long, I'm kind of in shock. Do you have a view on Costco at all?
Well, I get pushback on the Costco thing all the time. What I tell people is Costco is the ultimate cyclical stock, right? It
Yeah.
is not immune to a recession. If we get a real recession, that stock gets cut by 50%. Until then, I mean, look, I go there too. The funny thing is, they only accept Visa cards.
Yeah.
So I don't have a Visa card. I have a MasterCard and Amex. So when I go there, I have to pay cash. So I'm like getting cash out of the safe to pay cash. I've had $1,000 Costco runs where I've just given them like $1,200 at the cash register. you know.
Yeah, because it's all stuff that you need for your home. And I just, I had a tweet conversation with somebody that, tweeted out like Costco, rallying to new highs. Like, I don't need any more like mass packages of salmon and things like that. And you're like, no, you don't need that. But, if you think of the things that you walk out of the store with, I literally bought the stock because I got tired of spending so much money at the store and not owning it. You know, yeah, so now at least I feel like when I spend 500 or $1,000 there that I'm kind of hedged. I come home and see if the stock went up, but I only like to talk about it because I'm lousy at single stock trades and I'm a little bit in awe that I was able to navigate into Costco. I got the guys in my Slack channel into it for a trade and the thing is roofing now and I'm kind of excited but not sure what to think of it. So I'm glad we touched on it. We got to go to commodities now, JD, right? We have to talk about commodities. They're extremely volatile. We're seeing absolute carnage in the dollar this morning. We saw a big sell off in the dollar. Now we're seeing that short covering rally from the low of the range that we said last week was highly probable. Give me the setup in the dollar and gold and commodities right now.
Well, I think commodities have bottomed. Like you got the DeMark 13 in the Bloomberg Commodities Index.
Did we?
So I think commodities have bottomed. If you were to trade one commodity as a proxy for all commodities, you would trade copper. Copper is pretty ugly today. It had a pretty big bounce off the low. It rallied for like 2 weeks and it's kind of coming apart today. With the strength in the dollar today, it's been kind of a rough day for commodities across the board. But ultimately, long term, I think they bottomed.
It feels a little bit like they're trying to hold the beach ball under the water right now. There's one thing that came across my feed that I thought was interesting is that hedge funds are now shortest they've been in the ag complex for the last 5 years. So they're short grains and they're short meats and livestock and things like that, looking for record crops, farmers selling, soft demand, and things like that. So if they're short the ags, I'm imagining that they're probably short the base metals and trying to sell those and press them on rallies. And at some point, they're just going to stop going down. And God forbid we have a continuation of this dollar index retracement rally. They're going to get heavy and have to test the bottom of the range again. So we'll see what happens. I think a lot of it depends on the dollar. The thing that I don't love about copper is that copper has been sort of rallying up through, kind of bouncing off the 200-day moving average. Open interest is falling as it rallies, so it's just short covering. It's not a rally on massive volume and increasing open interest that gets you more excited.
That's a good observation. Yeah,
Yeah, that kind of thing gets you excited that a trend might be developing. Rising
yeah.
open interest on rallying copper. You're like, okay, somebody knows something here, and I should start paying attention. When it rallies on falling OI, they're just getting out of shorts, and it's just hot potato in copper right now. So that's an observation that I want to make. I want to look at the uranium chart really quick while we're talking about commodities. If Braden would throw that up there, I am a huge fan of bull markets that pull back and test the old highs, and the Sprott Uranium Trust just did that. And it's bouncing off of the old highs. As President Trump says in his upcoming administration, they're going to build nuclear power plants because we have to produce massive amounts of electricity. Do you have a view on uranium right now? It's a kind of, I've been a long term bull. We got all the assholes out at the highs. We bounced off last year's high at the lows. You have any thoughts on uranium?
Well, I'm bullish, but as you remember by the rumor, sell the news, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, maybe soon, uranium is going to be a sell the news event. So let's say Trump gets elected or Kamala or whoever, and Trump makes an announcement that we are going to build 20 nuclear power plants. That's to sell the news, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is this is what everybody has been buying the rumor for the last 4 or 5 years. And when you get that, that's the time to get out. So it's not time to get out yet. I'm still bullish. I would say we're probably in the seventh inning of this trade, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Great.
So
Great color. Great color. Now that you mentioned that, I kind of line it up kind of similarly on the chart. If you've seen it, we made that big peak. We broke down below the moving averages. We bounced off of last year's high, and now we're kind of in between a rock and a hard place between moving average resistance and the old highs. So we got to see how it trades in there and where it's trading when, the next president probably makes an announcement that we're going to be doing more nuclear power here in the U.S. Today we've got stocks selling off. Kind of interesting. Nvidia, trading a new low for this move on a 123 handle. We've got the S&P down at 5610. I want to talk about the rates markets really quick because the market, we sold off. One of the reasons that the market sold off to 5100 was because the curve steepened to zero. Right, we had the curve in negative territory for a record amount of time, predicting recession. We got the change in Fed stance, the curve steepening dramatically, and that's one of the reasons, along with the Nvidia bubble and the yen carry trade, why stocks sold off. Right now, we've got the curve back to zero again, or at least it's minus 3 basis points this morning, and the S&P is teed up at 5650. Right, to me, that leads me to believe that one of those things is unsustainable. Either the curve is not going to make it through zero and keep going, or the S&P is going to have to back off here. And now we've got that double top, a DMARC 13. This setup is interesting to me. Do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the curve is going to continue to steepen. I think the thing that's out of whack here is stocks. I think stocks should be lower. Um, so let's talk about Jackson Hole for a second.
Yeah.
So all Powell said was it is time to cut rates. That's all he said. He didn't say how much. He didn't say when. There was no indication of a 50 or a 25 at the September meeting. He just said it was time to cut rates. And that was a huge psychological impact that the biggest hawk in the history of the Federal Reserve said it's time to cut rates. So people bought bonds on that, right? Um, but you had other people on the FOMC, like Patrick Harker, saying it is going to be slow and methodical. Okay. And the market has completely ignored that. So if you listen to Harker and you say slow and methodical, well, that sounds like 25, 25, 25 to me, with maybe a couple of breaks in between. Like the market has priced in 8.5 rate cuts over the next year. Look, we could get 8.5 rate cuts, but that would require the economy to completely fall apart, right?
Yeah.
So, assuming everything is status quo, and we're kind of limping along, and unemployment is edging higher, and it's 4.5, and it's 4.7, and just things kind of suck, but it's not terrible, and the economy's still trucking. We're not going to get 8.5 rate hikes, right? Cuts, sorry.
Right, because
So
we're going to get a headline inflation impulse that's going to creep into the picture and level things off, wouldn't you think?
we are getting core PCE on Friday, and that's going to be a big one. It's supposed to be 2.9. We're supposed to get core PCE. So the other thing I will add is we had an auction of 2-year notes yesterday that went pretty well, which I was surprised about. It was actually a very positive auction. But I am more bearish on the long end. I'm more bearish on 10s and 30s because whoever gets elected, especially Kamala, if Kamala gets elected, this budget is going to get blown to smithereens,
50
right?
trillion, 50 trillion in our debt, national debt, right?
Yeah,
Easily.
we're going to get there. So now you're talking auctions that are 40, 50, 60 billion in 30-year bonds. The market is not going to be able to absorb that. We don't have the foreign buyers that we used to. So I am so bearish on 30s, I can't see straight, right? And I just got to control myself. So the curve should steepen, right? Front end rates come down, the back end can't absorb the supply. The curve should steepen. That's what should happen over the long term.
Sounds right. And if the curve is going to steepen, and continue through par into positive territory, the VIX is going to react to that. I guarantee you, seeing the curve in positive territory after having it buried in negative territory for 2 years, the VIX is going to react to that and stocks are going to sell off.
Yep.
So the setup, as you can see, as we can see, hopefully our listeners can see, and we'll see when this gets posted tomorrow, that's how we're looking and that's how we're leaning on this. Because we've seen these kind of setups before. It's not because we're hating on Nvidia. We're trying to give our clients the best advice we can. Um, I think we've got the whole setup wrapped up in a ball here. We've got the Nvidia coverage, we got the S&P coverage. We talked about interest rates, the dollar, commodities. We got everything. we've got to get to that less liquid type of investment. You know what kind I'm talking about, JD?
Private
Private
equity.
equity. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
going to get you on your hobby horse, because now we just intersected private equity with what you called a sports bubble, with, definitely a positive sentiment bubble in private equity.
man.
And where do you want to start?
This is like two dump trucks colliding, two big bubbles just crashing into each other, sports and private equity.
Right. So
I
we,
mean,
we we've
it
got to set it up though. We've got to set it up though. The NFL just signed a deal to allow private equity companies to own up to 10% of the teams. So go ahead, take it away. I just wanted to get that out.
so Mark Cuban, who is a cheese dick,
Cheese dick.
he
Totally.
is the only thing that guy is good at is picking the top, right? Like he is the best at picking the top. And he picked the top in what was it? Broadcast.com or whatever his stupid internet radio company was.
Yeah.
And he picked the top in the Dallas Mavericks. He bought it for like 260 million and sold it for 3.5 billion. Picked the top and he's out. We have a sports bubble. It is an obsession. Everybody's gambling on their apps. Everybody's gambling on DraftKings. There's ads for this all over the place. Then you have the NIL deals. You have college athletes making millions of dollars. Like we have a giant sports bubble. We have a private equity bubble. What's going to happen is if a private equity firm buys 10% of a team, this is exit liquidity for the owners, right? Like they're like, great, sold to you, palms out, like I'm getting liquid, and you donuts can own this team at a $6 billion valuation. It's all yours. Fine. That's what's going to happen.
Now, I appreciate that, because you've been kind of riding this private equity theme of yours, and that's how things tend to happen. Like, it wouldn't shock me if there's, you hear a major deal that kind of bursts the sports bubble a little bit. But I got to push back on the idea that we've reached the peak in this sports bubble yet, right? Think about A-Rod's contract in 2008 with the Yankees, right? It was the biggest contract of all time, 10-year, $275 million contract with a $10 million signing bonus, right? Because he's so handsome. The NFL Packers quarterback Jordan Love just signed a 4-year, $220 million
Oh my
contract,
God.
right? One of the biggest active contracts in all of sports. Okay. Trevor Lawrence signed a 5-year, $275 million contract with the Jags. And then you just think about the other contracts that are out there. Lionel Messi, 675 over 4 years, 675 million. Patrick Mahomes, 500 million over 10. Mike Trout, 426 million over 12 years. I mean, you can call it a bubble, and I'm going to tell you that it's still growing. That's what I
Oh,
see. That's all I think. These numbers are going to get more and more astronomical before they go down.
maybe.
I'm just following the trend, man. And like you said, I feel like we just got into this thing where the high school kids all have DraftKings on their phones and
You know,
this and that.
the one thing I'm going to say is there is going to be a massive gambling scandal in professional sports. I don't know if it's going to be baseball, football, basketball, whatever. There are going to be players betting millions of dollars on or against their own team. It is going to be the biggest gambling scandal ever. It is going to happen.
Yeah, that wouldn't shock me, with all this money at some level eventually comes power and corruption, and the story just wouldn't be complete unless we have a big blow up like that at the
Yep.
top of it. You and I are both fans of Peter Atwater, and I want to read a quote that he had about this private equity NFL thing, because I thought it was great. He makes great observations, especially sentiment observations. Peter Atwater says, and I quote, "The concern that I have with this one is not its scale, but its vast circular tentacles. Sports today equals luxury, equals media, equals celebrity, equals private equity, equals online gambling, equals higher education, equals dot, dot, dot. The Venn diagram is filled with overlapping circles with sports in the middle. If you listen closely, you can hear the money as it sloshes from one group to the next. The problem with it all at this point is this: fill an environment with enough money, and inevitably it becomes a swamp, even a football field."
Yep.
That's a great quote, man. That's a
Yep.
great quote, and that sums up the market really, really well. Um, I think we can end the private equity conversation there and get away from the market for a moment. Looks to me like the Justice League just formed for the conservatives, and the left had to come back with another lawsuit against Trump to combat that positive headline, right? He just got Elon Musk's support, RFK for Trump, and then Tulsi Gabbard for Trump within a 48-hour period. What do you think of that, JD?
I don't I don't think Tulsi's endorsement really does anything. I think anybody who is following Tulsi probably was going to vote for Trump anyway.
Fair.
I think RFK's endorsement does mean a lot.
For sure.
I think he was polling 3 to 5% in a lot of states, and if 3/4 of those voters go to Trump, I mean that pushes him over the top. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, I saw the Jack Smith lawsuit. Like, I'm not a legal expert. I don't really know the details, but it's just more the same. So
Yeah, yeah, more of the same, just to keep negativity in the headlines about Trump. The one thing that I would point out, I think about, this sort of RFK for Trump thing. What's amazing is that he didn't cancel his campaign. He tried to pull himself off the ballot and did so selectively in states where he would have been pulling votes from Trump, right? And in some of the states that he wanted to pull his name off, he would have been pulling votes from Kamala. And for example, Michigan won't let him take his name off the ballot. To me, that says we've already calculated how many votes we need to steal this, and we're not letting you upset the math. Right. I just see it that way because it seems like they were at the heart of the controversy in the last election. Them not allowing him to drop off the ballot is just such a sign of advanced guilt to me that I can't get my head around it. But
I got to jump in and say something here.
please.
In like 2 weeks, people are going to be able to vote. That's
Yeah.
insanity. Why do people need 2 months to vote? I can see it if you're. Look, I was in the Coast Guard. I voted absentee ballot when I was in the military. I was on a ship, okay? And I got an absentee ballot and I voted. I was on the fucking water, right? Like, so
That's a good reason.
that's a good reason. But
Yeah.
nobody else needs 2 months to vote. Everybody should vote on the same day so they have the same information. How many people are going to vote for Kamala or Trump, and then some piece of information comes out a couple weeks later and they say, oh shit, I should have voted for the other person and it's too late? Like, we should not have a 2 month voting period. Everybody should vote on the same day with the same information.
I couldn't agree more. And we're the only ass backwards country on the globe that has allowed all of this corruption and all of these players to have their angle on the election. And I saw an article the other day about elections in Japan, like certain elections in Japan, everyone votes the same day. They count the votes by hand and they have the winner by dinner time.
They had in Argentina, which is a second world nation, they had they voted by paper ballots and they had them all counted that night. It was done.
Exactly, exactly. And if you remember, I'm sure you remember when we were kids, that's how all the presidential elections went, right? There you got an idea of how the race was going all day, and then you'd have the people that were leaving work that would sort of, change, the race sort of leadership between 5 and 8 p.m. And then by that night, 9, 10 o'clock, you were going to bed knowing exactly who won the election. And there was never a variance. There was never a
Yep.
variance until we got to the Bush administration and the hanging chads in Florida. From there, we just fucked the pooch right into next Tuesday with our own elections. So I don't know if we ever fix it. But speaking of elections, I know one guy that is going to keep a much lower profile this election season than he did last season when he spent $400 million creating the system that allowed mail-in ballots in Wisconsin. Right. So Mark Zuckerberg just came out with an apology, I would say, at a minimum for election interference, at a maximum for treason, basically for saying that the government pressured him to censor things about the election, things about Hunter Biden's laptop. He censored it from the American people, and he shouldn't have. That is election interference in broad daylight. Do you have a view on why Zuckerberg is coming clean all of a sudden, JD?
Um, I don't, but I would say that If I were in his position, I'm not sure I would have done anything differently. If you're getting pressure from the government,
Yeah.
I mean, they can take away your birthday. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and he came off to me as a guy that was kind of a really an inside, like a reptilian insider, and he actually does show signs of being human in navigating this massive. He's been at the epicenter of the crisis, right? He is the information machine. We just went through a historic pandemic, lockdown, information censorship, series of events that the country's never seen before, and this poor guy, not poor guy, this rich guy is trying to navigate, the center of the internet through, this storm. So I think at some level, I think less that he is, a conspiratorial character, and more that he is just trying to do his best and sometimes fucking it up real good.
yeah.
So that's entirely possible. You had a couple of random questions for me, JD, in the notes we shot back and forth. Why don't you fire those at me, and I got a couple for you.
When was the first time you saw boobs in a movie when you were a kid? What movie was it? Do you remember?
Yeah, absolutely. It was 10 with Bo Derek.
Wow.
Yeah, her
What? How
running
old
down
were
the
you when
beat.
you saw that?
Couldn't have been 13, right? Like 10, 11, 12, or something like that. And I didn't see it in the movie theater. I think I saw it when it like made it to VHS tape.
Yep.
And I got to see it that way somehow. But she's a goddess, still is, an absolutely beautiful woman, and that'll change your life as a 12-year-old.
I saw boobs much younger. I was 8, and I was in my house, and we had cable. So HBO did a thing where it was like free for a weekend, and we had the TV on, and my grandmother was watching this movie Ragtime, which was made in 1982, and I just walked by the TV and there's boobs on the TV. And I'm like, holy shit. I'm
That's
8 years old. I'm like, this is the best thing ever.
What are you watching, Grandma? Yeah, seriously. Oh my God, that's funny, man. That's fun. Yeah, you don't forget stuff like that. I suppose it's fun to recall back and remember. 10 was actually a really good movie with Dudley Moore. Some really good lines in it, and it's a fairly decent plot too. What was the other question you had for me?
When was, how many fights have you been into in your life?
I will say that in my adult life, thank God, none.
Yeah, me
But
too.
but I will say that as early as definitely like one instance in college, definitely three or four instances in high school. I was involved in a situation in high school where there were basically 8 guys from my high school squared off in the middle of the street against 8 guys from another town that wanted us to leave a party, and I didn't know what was about to happen. Then all of a sudden my friend slugged the biggest guy right in the jaw, and it turned into a freaking melee, and I'm not particularly comfortable in that situation. But that you realize that there wasn't too much damage done, nobody got severely hurt, and it was over. But I think that was the biggest altercation that I was ever in my life, and a couple, I guess, in junior high school too. To be honest with you,
I had a couple fights when I was 8, 9 years old, and I won those. It was like one punch and it was over. I just won.
yeah,
And then I got into a fight when I was like 13. There was a fight between these two other kids down at the baseball field, and one of the kids was getting his ass kicked, and I was going to jump in and help him out. And this 16-year-old kid came in and just whipped my ass. He was like 6'2" and just like slapped the shit out of me. And that was the last time I've ever been in a fight.
yeah. That stuff's unpleasant, and as an adult, I avoid them like the plague.
Yeah.
Literally, like you don't want it. There's nothing there for you. There's nothing there having a physical confrontation with anybody. I don't mind confrontation, but I like to be able to verbally smooth it out somehow, so that it doesn't escalate at some level. So I got a couple questions for you, JD. I want to start off with, what do you drink out of that little silver cup that you have on your desk there?
Oh, that's espresso.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Is it?
I have a I have an espresso machine with the pods.
Ah,
It's the best thing in the world. I have like 3 espressos a day.
I'll bet. Dude, I started drinking coffee again because I saw a horrifying video on YouTube, I mean on Twitter, about Red Bull, which has been my go-to for years, but somebody heated up Red Bull like in a frying pan for like really long time under really hot conditions, and like the form of it never changed. Like they were heating this thing up, it didn't evaporate, it stayed bright orange, it stayed fizzy, and I'm like, I don't think I should be drinking that anymore. So I'm going back to find some coffee or some other caffeinated things, because in this business, we're not making it through the day as writers without caffeine. So that's interesting. One other question I have for you, JD. It's early, and I know you just moved into your new house, but is there anything that you've built in your new house that you feel like, maybe I shouldn't have done that? Is there anything like that yet? Because we built the house that we live in, and 10 years later, I've got about a handful of things that I wish I had done differently.
Yeah, there's a couple things. Like, we got the fancy Sub-Zero fridge, right?
Yeah,
But I should have gotten the king size one, like the really, really big one. Like we got a big one, but it's not the super big one.
yeah,
And we don't have enough freezer space. So we're gonna have to get one of those freezers that you put in the garage to put like a bunch of meat in. So
yeah.
that's something I would have done different. There's a couple other things, but mostly it's worked out great. So
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. Talk to me in 10 years. There'll be something
yeah.
that drives you absolutely up a wall. I just literally took down an entire barbecue kind of eyesore that I had in my backyard, and now I like it. I have this big open view, and I got to buy a new barbecue, which is fine. But what do we want to end with, JD? What's our final topic du jour? I think we covered everything. We were off markets really, really for a while. We covered the PE NFL engagement really well. What else we got?
We can just talk about boobs more.
That's always good for a horn. All right, man. I think we got everything covered right down to the last line. I'm ready for an hasta la vagina.
All right, hasta la vagina, my friend.
Bye, everybody.